I'm here on campus at Bethel University with Greg Bourland, who is a friend, an instructor, and also a colleague here at Bethel University. Greg, welcome to the studio.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me here with you and a chance to chat.
So Greg, you're in a significant role of influencing talent management with a very well-respected organization here in the Twin Cities, and an organization, from what I understand, that really impacts talent management throughout the globe as well. So tell us more about your passion for the work that you get to do every day.
Great. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here and share what I know, and I appreciate the time, and I'll try my best. So your question about talent management. I have a passion for talent management that's really grounded first in my own faith and my belief that we all have a bit of the spark of the divine in us, and that we have the responsibility and opportunity to fan that spark and build that over time. It goes back to the idea of human development, that we all are creatures who can grow and learn and do more even as adults. And I think that's especially important as we think about things like the changes in the economy and the changes in the workforce. Having that faith that people can and do grow is what helps me think about things as we're doing changes in organizational structure, changes in roles, things like that, because I do have a belief that people can grow and do more and can adapt to those changes and can be very successful. I also, as you mentioned, have the chance to work internationally and travel internationally, which is a great honor. That's particularly fun for me, honestly. Having a chance to work with our team in Europe or our team in Asia, and most often in Asia it's with the Japanese team. That's challenging with cultural barriers and language barriers, but it's particularly fun because I think there's some really true universals that cut across all of those boundaries. And then finally, I would say what makes me really excited about my job every day is the opportunity to work with the wonderful team of HR managers and HR directors that I have on my team that are really implementing those programs, and then I have the opportunity to really act as a coach to them and help them develop those programs that they're implementing and directing locally wherever it might be within our business.
I'm sure it's very inspiring for our students to hear from you about your heart and your passion to invest in people.
Thank you.
And have that modeled to them as well. So thank you for sharing your heart in that.
Absolutely.
So we might be experiencing different levels of talent management and seeing it modeled differently in our organizations. You know, some of our organizations may be really on track with managing talent.
Yes.
Some of our organizations might be half there and half not. And some of our organizations may not even have a clue what talent management is. So give us a picture into the process. Give us a big picture overview of what really is talent management. What should we be thinking about? What should we be looking for in our organizations?
That is a really big, powerful question, so thank you. It's a lot of ways to think about that, and maybe before I dive in, I think it's easy to look at a larger organization like mine or other big Fortune 500 companies and think that simply because they're large, or maybe they're able to invest more dollars, or maybe have a more mature HR organization, that we've got the magic sauce and we've got this all solved. But interestingly enough, a lot of what I focus on is that frontline manager and then the leadership team that's supporting those frontline managers. That's where I think a lot of the talent management actually occurs. So if you're even in a smaller organization or one that doesn't have all of these tools and quite the same amount of opportunities that maybe we've had in a bigger company, I think you still have to focus on what you can do as a manager, because I believe it's really a lot of what happens and a lot of the performance in an organization has to do with the effectiveness of that frontline manager. And then in a larger organization, we're just lucky that we have the chance to support those managers maybe with more tools, but I think a frontline manager in any organization should be focused on talent management, which is why I think this is such an important topic for our graduates here from Bethel as they're developing their career. But back to your specific question about what talent management means to me, or how would I define it. I often go back, and you of course know this, to the 5B model that has been out there and many people have used. That talks about the 5 B's of talent management. And the first one is a question of buying talent. And you can think about that in terms of things like the Good to Great book and the right seat and having the right people and the right seat on the bus. And then I always add to that at the right cost. So in terms of buying talent. Do you have the right people to drive that bus where you need to do to meet your business objectives or your nonprofit or whatever type of organization you might be working with? So that's the buy decision about how are you buying that talent in the marketplace, what the labor market looks like. Honestly, I pay a lot of attention to things like the unemployment rate, sliced data around that about engineering level roles or technical roles, how much are those available in different markets. Where are we able to buy or bring in talent through schools and things like that. So that's the first of the B's is the buy. The second one that, again, I'm probably most passionate about is the build. Helping people come in through the organization and then grow through different roles throughout their life cycle with us. I have a belief that people do go through kind of a life cycle through an organization. I don't have the belief that I want to buy or hire somebody and have them work with us forever. I'd be happy if they stayed with the company forever, but I have an attitude of I want people to cycle through roles and have those different opportunities if that's what they want to do, and be able to build a longer career. We support that build through obviously technical training and things like that. But again, my focus or more passionate is typically around leadership training. So that's on the build. I think you can do other things in the B's. Another one is you can borrow talent. And we do a decent amount of that through agencies, through contract workers, through other types of employees or non-employees as we call them, to keep them separate from our direct BSC employees, our direct company employees. And sometimes that strategy of borrowing makes a ton of sense, whether it's unique skill sets, maybe it's, again, a cost issue, maybe it's amount of time, all those things around maybe borrowing the talent you might just need for a bit or for a particular location or something like that. Another B of the 5 B's is bind. And that's, of course, we had to have it, whoever made this model up, I think many people I've heard this model from, so I would source it if I knew if it was one particular person. But the B on the bind had to match the alliteration of the B's, of course. But the bind is all talking about retaining and engaging people. If we bind them and kind of get them engaged with the organization and the mission and what we're trying to accomplish, and in the sense that they're having both personal success in life in their own sense of goals and such, but also have a sense of significance about what they're doing actually has meaning. And again, I'm very lucky in that regard. I've worked in mission-driven organizations my whole career. Prior to the medical device company I work at now, I worked in a hospital system. So again, you can think about people are there for a reason, where they're truly there to help people, to transform lives, to make lives better, to those kinds of things in the healthcare sector, which is pretty exciting. So that's what the B of the bind is. And the last one isn't quite as much fun. It's called bounce. And sometimes people are no longer in the right roles. Sometimes people get stale. Sometimes, unfortunately, the organization moves past them as maybe the organization is developing, but somebody personally is not. So all those kinds of reasons, you may sometimes have to bounce somebody out of the organization if they're not a good fit or something is going wrong there. So I think about that whole life cycle of people into, develop through, and then out of the organization, either of their own will or unfortunately, if we have to do something to help them leave as well. So my team works on all of those pieces of the pie, and I think it's important to think about that systemically as well, instead of just each of those pieces independently.
Yes, that's a great model. It's a very simple tool to help us, really stay with a big picture of talent management. Just repeat the 5 B's, just for anyone who's listening.
Absolutely. I probably said those kind of fast. It's buy, build, borrow, bounce, and bind were the 5 B's.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So what are some of the trends with talent management? Our organizations are changing so fast today. How do we keep up? What are some of the things that we need to be thinking about related to talent management trends? What do you see happening?
Oh gosh. There's a lot of stuff out there that's happening kind of in the human resource space or the talent development space. I guess first I always have to take a a thought to myself about, do you want to be the bleeding edge of some of those kinds of changes, or do you want to be a fast follower, or do you want to wait and see how things develop? I mean, there's been some trends about, changing performance management systems, or ratings or no ratings, or some of those kinds of things. And just to finish that thought, I think some companies have jumped on the bandwagon of some of those really trends and actually then backed off. A couple companies I know have gone with a no rating system, only a couple of years later to reintroduce a ratings-based performance management system. So no, other trends that are out there.
And thank you for sharing that, because sometimes we think if something is out there and progressive that we have to jump on with it. So I think that helps take a little bit of the guilt and the stress off of thinking that we have to. So thanks for sharing that.
No.
But yes, what other trends do you see?
One trend I could mention is, again, I think there's a greater realization today in the importance of the role of those frontline managers, and then above them the directors and VPs that provide the leadership support to them. And I think those frontline managers have a very, very tough role. Obviously and typically that's somebody's first management role or first leadership role is being a frontline manager. Probably the first time they've had a large team and been responsible for those kinds of things. They're being held responsible for performance or numbers or results from the leadership above them. The team below them is probably giving them pressure up about maybe time, schedule, things like that. So they're often in that position of the rub. So I think a lot about what's going on in talent management that really helps them. And one thing that I think is interesting is a lot of companies are doing, like I've started to do at my company, is provide a feedback loop for employees to rate their managers and give feedback to their managers on how well they're behaving as leaders and talent managers. And a couple of years ago, I piloted a program in my company within my division, and then last year we rolled it across our global organization, over 30,000 employees, that is a survey process, really short, that gives employees a chance to give that direct feedback on management behaviors around things like, my manager conducts regular one-on-ones with me and has that interaction on a regular basis. My manager cares about me as a person. My manager is helping me develop to my future role, regardless as to whether or not that role is in my organization or somewhere else in the company. Those are just a couple of the samples of the short questionnaire that we did to create that feedback loop.
So is that a trend that you're seeing where employees are able to give feedback on their manager?
I do. I think that is, I don't know that that's a bleeding edge, but that's definitely a leading edge, a practice that I think is pretty cool and reinforces a bunch of stuff that I care about, like servant leadership and focus on what's important, which is honestly the people who are closest to the customer.
Thank you. Are there any other trends that we need to be thinking about?
Oh, geez. There's just so much. There's a bunch of stuff out there on training and assessment and development. But I don't know. Not anything that's. I think we have to be a little careful, again, as I mentioned earlier, about the fad of the week. I worry a bit about, even in my own HR department and my own team, about appearing like we're coming across with the flavor of the month type of initiative. So I try to take a step back a little bit. I mean, maybe a second trend as I'm talking and thinking about this. I think a lot of companies have done very traditional, broad all-employee surveys would be another example, through the various organizations, Gallup, Press Ganey, et cetera. I think maybe there's probably a trend away from some of those to measure engagement and go to the micro level, and also try to include some more thoughts around agile. Do small scale, short, quick, fast, iterative cycles instead of waiting. The more classic approach has been to wait, to do an annual or biannual all-employee survey with 100-something questions, and the problem with those kinds of approaches is. At least in my business, the world is moving too fast. So by the time we would roll out an all-employee survey with 100-something questions, and then 3 months later you would start to get reports, and then you'd start to do action planning, and then you would, by the time you would go through that formal process, your business is probably cycled 2 or 3 times. So I think that's probably the only other trend I would add is this movement to anything to be more agile and quick.
Yes, and I think we want feedback immediately. We don't want to
Absolutely.
wait for feedback. We want to know how we're doing right away or know if we need to make adjustments. So as you mentioned, that waiting on feedback, it could take another year for you to really get the truth about how you performed.
Absolutely. That's part of the interesting challenge we have is I think about culture, and one of the drivers of performance and quality results and long-term success, I think, is about the kind of culture you build in an organization. And I balance that, which is this desire for fast and speed and the need and the change of the world. But I also think about the fact that it takes years to change and build a culture. I could digress for a moment there. One of the things I've been working a lot on is diversity and inclusion. And part of that has been a focus on life work and life work balance and integration. It's taken me a couple of years to change the organization to be much more open to flex work, flex hours, those kinds of things, so that that's now normal in our organization. Years ago, I had a leader years ago, say something to me, 5 o'clock one day about kind of ruefully about the engagement of the team. And why am I the only person here at 5 o'clock? Why are the cubes empty? Why are people here? And I had to remind him. I said, how many emails do you get at 9 o'clock at night? And that really opened the light bulb, because when you get open to those kinds of different work schedules and approaches, you're much more open to the kind of people that you can develop and engage with your workforce, much more friendly to women and things like that, people who are in caregiver roles. I balance the need to kind of drive those kind of long-term systemic change and how hard it is to make that happen in a big organization versus the speed factor that we're all driving.
Well, thank you for being aware of those balances and trying to find ways to maneuver through some of those extremes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge.
So you mentioned quite a bit about that frontline manager earlier, and
Absolutely.
as you know, the students in our program, some of them are in those types of positions. That's a very real position for our
Absolutely.
students and graduates. Some are in higher level positions of leadership where they have more influence on talent management processes, and some of our students, they're more in informal roles.
Absolutely.
Where there really is no opportunity to maybe invest in people, as one would think, in a formal way.
Absolutely.
And some of our students are in, a lot of just cross-reporting relationships where, it's more colleagues and more informal influence as well. So speak to us about the key, say 2 to 3 key things that we can keep in mind about talent management, no matter what position we have in an organization. What are 2 to 3 key things we ought to keep in mind?
That's great, because I think you're absolutely right about the students and the type of organizations and the roles that people have. And I try to remind people that there's different kinds of leadership, and that positional leadership is honestly the weakest form of leadership that I see. That's people relying on a title or a role or some responsibility as their basis for authority or ability to have power to get things done, and that's a pretty weak foundation. So even for those, especially for those who are not in formal management roles, but maybe in team leadership roles, matrix leadership roles, those kinds of things, those are honestly some of the most fun jobs, I think, because they really have the chance to work across an organization or across those kinds of structures. And I think that's a great way to test yourself out and see how much fun you can have leading a team, because in those kinds of roles, people are not giving you time because of your title, or they're not giving you time because of some of that other kind of stuff that honestly isn't important at the end of the day.
Exactly.
But when it comes back to some trends or what we can do, I think one of the big, maybe I'll hit a couple. One big issue I think that's going to become more and more important in talent management over the next few years, and I talk a lot about this at my work, is the ability and skill at managing a more diverse workforce. I think that that's a skill that some people have and do a good job at, but I think a lot of people honestly struggle when they're managing people that are different than themselves. I mean, I even remember back to one of my first management jobs where most of the team was much older than I am, or was at the time. And I think that's also common as people are maybe moving up the org structure and you're managing somebody who's quite a bit older than you are, maybe has much more knowledge about something than you do, but you're in the management role. So that's just having that skill, whether it be with age, whether it be with culture or race or gender or whatever those kinds of differences might be in the workplace. I just think that's going to become tremendously more important in the future. I would really encourage people to kind of take the time to learn about those cultural and racial, ethnic, and other kinds of differences.
So one of the things you're encouraging us in then is whether we have a formal role
Yes.
or even an informal role. One of the things that we can be working on right now is really engaging with those people that are different. Either
Absolutely.
ethnically different or in terms of gender differences or
Yes.
personality differences. Engaging with those people will help us become better talent developers.
Absolutely, and it's totally going to be a requirement for the future. I think about, I have little snippets in my brain about things that I bring up occasionally at work about, such as 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every year in the United States. I think about, at least currently, the economy is very strong, and the unemployment rate in Minnesota is about 2-ish%. And then you start slicing that data, and you look at, people who have that number, of course, is an average across people who only have high school or less versus, various degrees to graduate degrees, skill level variation with that. You can imagine that mean is not, the average is not the whole story. So when I think about all of that kind of labor market factor, our ability to recruit and engage and really get good output and good teamwork from a diverse workforce is gonna have to be a key skill, because you're just not going to be able to fill your roles any other way. You're not going to be able to run your business in 10 years if you don't have that ability. So the sooner people engage and work on thinking differently and dealing with people, and again, getting the most out of people who might be different than yourself would be key. So that would be the first one I would say would be that. And then probably related, I really think people would have a lot of success if they worked on their relationship skills. And we specifically call that out in our leadership competencies, relationship building. Your ability to go into a room and meet people and engage with them, people you don't know. I mean, I can think about like my first trip to Japan many years ago. I went by myself. I had met somebody over the phone, but I had never actually seen them. So here I am arriving, and not only people I don't know, but also cultural and language barriers and trying to deal with that. It was pretty challenging, but it was tremendously fun and engaging to me. So I would just tell people, if you've never experienced those kinds of challenges, put yourself out there. Try to build those skills as early and often as you can.
So you're sort of inspiring us to become the type of people that can enter into any kind of social setting.
Yes.
And find a level of comfort, find a level of, being able to engage with different people in the room or in that social sphere.
Yes.
And so that also is a way that we can work on our talent management skills.
Absolutely, and especially for the introverts. I actually, believe it or not, I'm pretty far over on the introvert scale when I do my self-assessment stuff, and then similar on other tests. And I would just say your ability to do those things that we just talked about might feel a little easier if you're more on the extroverted side of the equation. But honestly, I think that even those who are extroverted probably have to take a step back and say, are they talking or are they listening? And then people who are on the introverted side have to push themselves to get over that little bit of discomfort and try to build that skill. I definitely think it's a skill that you can build.
That's excellent. Anything else that you would like to suggest that we keep working on, whatever our role is as a talent developer?
Yeah, the relationship skills, diversity skills. Let me think, anything else that's on my, those are the two that for certain were high on my list. I just think generally, things like self-reflection and self-development. I think
some of the things we're doing in this course.
Absolutely agree. You are spot on. It's and I would challenge people don't just think about this as something that you do here in this course or here in this program, but hopefully you're building a skill that you're going to continue to use. I think about, I do leadership coaching. I'm a certified coach, et cetera, and do that at work and elsewhere. And one of the biggest challenges in the people that I coach typically is they'll have some sort of a derailer in their persona that's causing them issues in their leadership and with the teamwork and the group that they're working with, all the way up and down the org chart. From the top to the bottom, it's very common that people will have some sort of a derailer behavior. And the best way to deal with those kinds of things is to first realize you may be unconsciously doing that. You may be unconsciously behaving a certain way. You may be unconsciously overreacting to bad news. And if you do that, for example, is that person going to come tell you the bad news the next time? Are you welcoming that kind of information that you really need in order to make good decisions? Or are you putting people off so that they're afraid to talk to you, and then you're going to be surprised weeks or months later when something doesn't go well? So all of that kind of self-reflection, I think, is a great skill.
Thank you. Thanks for those steps for us to consider as we look at becoming, talent managers, even if we don't have that formal role.
Absolutely.
So then, some of our organizations are further along in talent management than others. And I like to think of talent management as more of an attitude in a person and maybe more of a climate or a culture in an organization.
Yes.
How do we actually know where our organization's at related to talent management? How do we know if it's not really looking at it? How do we know if it's sort of looking at it, or how do we know if it's really into it? What kinds of things should we look for in an organization to know if it's one that really has that talent management attitude or not?
That's good. It's you're kind of asking about how you would kind of diagnose the maturity of an organization at their ability of
developing people,
which is the whole idea. A former CEO I used to know had a great line, which is, to grow your business, grow your people. And I remember that a lot as well, because I think that's absolutely true. You may think that the answer to growing your business is having some great strategic idea or some new product launch or something like that, and that'll get you a spike or get you a month or two or a quarter or two, but the sustainability is all about that building of people. So thinking about, if I were to go into an organization and do some thinking about whether they were particularly mature, I guess I would ask questions around, how is your, and not that you need a formal process for this, but just how are you doing on developing people for succession planning? Are you filling most of your management roles internally or not? That would be a kind of a classic way to diagnose, are you doing a good job, without getting overly invested in, how do you actually do you do a formal annual review cycle? Do you do a, succession planning like some of the big companies like us do? All those kinds of things are formalizing what I think people should be doing informally anyways. And so maybe in a smaller organization, asking questions about that, about how often do people move around the organization? Are they hiring somebody to be a plug in a role forever, and then when that person leaves, they're just going to go buy another person? Or are they actually moving people around the company and making those kinds of changes? And sometimes I've heard people say in more, less mature organizations, we don't have the time or the money to do some of these things. We're a smaller company, or we don't have as much money, or we can't afford to send people off to various courses or things or programs, support tuition assistance or whatever. And I actually flip that on them, and I say, how much does it cost to hire somebody? How much does it cost to train somebody? And also, when you go out to the labor market to buy talent, you're typically going to pay top dollar to buy that talent. You have to convince somebody, typically, to leave their current job to come work for you. I'm not going to do that typically for a pay cut. I'm typically going to do that for an increase or something to encourage me to come. So it's much more cost effective, and it's the right kind of culture, I think, for high performance to be really focused internally. So anyways, that would be a couple of my questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I think that really watching our people being moved up, our people being moved around in the organization, getting those opportunities to try other types of work and types of skills, and That's really important. That actually brings lift to the organization when you see that happening from within.
Absolutely.
So thank you for pointing that out.
And even if it's, sometimes people will say, not everybody does tuition assistance, or not everybody goes to classes, or not everybody does this stuff. And I don't know, I believe if you have a team of 6 or 8 people and you have one of those people doing those kinds of things, it lifts the whole team. And it makes a difference, and it makes that difference of, they're coming back into the workforce with some new ideas every day, and it's lifting the whole boat.
Oh, yeah. Good point. So here we are in this course, and we're rounding a corner in this course, and we want to step out, and we really want to use the things that we're learning in our investment in our organization and in our investment of others. So how do we actually press for positive change within our organizations related to talent management? How do we, what does that look like? Even if we don't formally have influence in talent management, how do we move our organizations forward? How do we press for positive talent management change? What can that look like? And is that a no-no?
No,
is that
no.
okay?
Yes. Well, hopefully it would be okay. That might be a good diagnostic question about whether you're working for the right company from a values match perspective. If I were working for a company that didn't care about people and didn't understand that people were the drivers of financial and other success, I would probably leave that organization, to be honest. I know that's easy for me to say, and that's probably harder for others to say who maybe have some financial commitments or other issues that make it harder for them to move. But I think that core, you've got to be willing to make that kind of commitment to what you believe. Now, I'm thinking back to what you can do as an individual, I think, is more specifically your question.
What can we do as individuals coming out of this course with all these good resources to really press for positive change?
I think one thing is I guess I would say no company that I know of, even the ones that have really invested a ton in this space, have figured out the secret sauce. And so I think when I even look around my organization or other big organizations, I typically see what I call islands of excellence. And that's where a particular part of an organization has really gripped it and ripped it and really got it under control, and they know what they're doing, and people there are, their performance is out of the park, and people there are probably working really hard but probably getting great results and feeling pretty darn engaged. And I think about how do you build those little islands of excellence even if the rest of the organization maybe isn't there yet? And that's I think is all to do with the local organization. And what I mean by that is I think all the research, and you know this, that talks about people leave managers, not companies, and people leave teams and not giant companies. So if you're running a small team of, again, 6 or 8 or whatever people that you might have on your team, I think you can make a difference with just those 6 or 8 people. And in fact, that's probably where a lot of the magic happens. The opportunity, the role, the impact that you can have on somebody's life as a project leader or a team leader or something like that is huge. If you can help that person and coach them and help them, be the superstar that they probably want to be, that is awesome. And so I don't know, I guess I would just encourage people to think about what's in their span of control or what's in their wheelhouse. And hopefully, you get enough of these little islands of excellence and you start to change an org. Yeah, I guess that's where I would go, is focus on what you control. And I guess the last thing I'd add there is it also comes down to your view of people, and again, how do you value people or not? And how do you respect people, and what's your belief system? And if you have the attitude that people are disposable, or people are robots, or people are here to steal from the company every day, I think that really changes your perspective about how you treat people, and you get those kind of bad results. But I think if you come into an organization, and I preach this all the time at work, that what's my line? It's treat people like adults, and almost everyone will act like it. And I have my little disclaimer at the end, because of course you're always going to have the end of the bell curve, right? You're always, you get, in my organization, several thousand people. Unfortunately you're gonna scoop up the bottom of the bell curve without wanting to, and you can deal with that, but don't treat your whole organization like that bottom of the bell curve. Treat your organization and help people grow to be what that is, versus reacting to the occasional outlier.
So really what you're suggesting for us as a next step is to really work on our mindset
Yes.
related to the people around us.
Yes.
And really work towards having a positive mindset towards those individuals that they are really trying to give their best.
Yes.
And how can we come alongside of where they're at and help them take a next step in a positive way?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, do you really think most people come to work every day to steal, or do you think they're coming here to loaf off? If that's your point of view, I feel, I feel bad for you, and whatever your life experience that maybe gave you that point of view. But I think if you come in and have the attitude that most people are here, or almost everybody is here because they want to be here, they want to do something they think has meaning and value. Again, in my organization, I'm real lucky because we have a very close mission. What we do really matters and changes people's lives. But I think in any organization, even if you're making widgets, you still have the chance to impact your teammates and your group. And if you're not making the world better, you're at least making your team better.
And so then through that mindset, that positive mindset, you're suggesting we can sort of build that island of excellence.
Exactly.
Where even if our whole organization isn't on track with talent management
Yes.
to the level that we'd like or we hope, that we can begin to build that within our small team.
Yes.
And create that healthy and encouraging environment.
Yes.
Of talent management, talent development, and then hopefully influence the organization.
And what's really cool for folks who are successful at that, they get to have this incredible reputation within their organizations. So if I'm leading one of these little islands that's doing well, when you have a job opening on your team, you're going to have people beating down the door. I want to come work for that person because I saw how they treat their people, or I saw that person was promoted, or I saw whatever. You build that reputation and it starts to spread.
Thank you for sharing that, because I found with students who don't have those formal leadership or management roles that sometimes they feel like they can't make an impact. And so I agree with you, in trying to encourage them
Yes.
to just bloom where they're at
Yes.
and invest in people and come alongside and support people,
Yes.
that they will get noticed in that.
Yes.
So thank you for affirming that as someone in such a key position in an
Yes.
organization managing talent. So Greg,
Absolutely.
is there anything else that you would like to share with our students related to talent management?
I guess the last thing I would mention is, let's remember the purpose of an organization, and the purpose of, in my case, a for-profit business, but that is in a mission-driven space, or prior to that in a nonprofit hospital system, or anywhere else someone might be working. It's, we're here to do something, and hopefully something of good and value to society. But I always try to keep those business goals front and center of mind. When I build the HR strategy for my team and what we're trying to do with the culture and the workforce, and then update that, it's always starts and is grounded in what the business objectives are. So literally, as I'm sitting through strategic planning sessions or annual operating planning sessions, I'm thinking about, okay, what's happening to the business, what's happening to the market, what's happening there, and I have that view of how that's going to impact our profit and loss statement, our ability to invest in things like that and make those kind of strategic trade-offs. And that's probably one of the things I think some people honestly in HR forget, is they want to run out and do great programs and activities, and they forget to make that linkage back. And that's where I think we sometimes get in trouble. But if you keep those things front and center in your brain, I think you'll have great success, and you'll find the organization is behind you.
Helpful insight there. So whatever role we're in,
Yes.
we can always be thinking about linking our investment in people back to the business and making sure we make that connection.
Exactly. And it may sound a little nebulous, but it is so true. If you think about whatever your business issue is, maybe it's a growing business and you need to rapidly hire people, or maybe it's a mature business and you're working on your cost structure or efficiency, or wherever you are in those cycles, if you think about how that impacts the way that you need, impacts the kinds and types and engagement of people that you need for success, that'll empower you to really break down all those barriers and really help us invest in people.
Great point. Well, Greg, I know that you have many opportunities around you, and there's a lot of places where you could be right now.
Oh, thank you.
And so I just want to really thank you for making time for us and making time for the students. And especially I want to thank you for your heart.
Oh.
I mean, your heart for investing in people, investing in leaders, your heart for our students here at Bethel. I really appreciate it, and I know we really appreciate it. So thanks for making the time today.
No, absolutely. I think of this as a calling, so I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, we hope you enjoyed this time with Greg, and we hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for listening.